Welcome to Archery Talk 101 podcast, your guide to better archery skills. We'll bring you the latest tips, tricks, and expert advice, but that's not all. We'll also have interviews with top archers and industry professionals and reviews of the latest gear and equipment and much more. Hey, today we're going to find out what it's like to be a traditional archer. Hi, my name is Rory Canterbury. I'm going to be your host today on Archery Talk 101, and we have a special guest on today. Mark is joining us. Mark, introduce yourself and tell us a little something about you.
Well, my name is Mark Helsel. I live just south of Grand Rapids, Michigan. So kind of southwest corner area of Michigan. Been hunting since I was legally able at age 12, but I started shooting a little fiberglass bow at probably nine or 10 years old. So I'm 54 now, so it's been a couple years. I was way deep in the compound world. I shot all over the place. I was sponsored at one time as a factory shooter for elite archery for a few years. That got to be too time consuming. And that was just constraints I put upon myself, practicing, couple hours every night when I got home from work, and then every weekend was spent at a tournament or two each day, Saturday and Sunday. And it just took its toll. Too much time away from the family, and too much time just invested. And I got to the point that if I couldn't hit a dime at 40, 50 yards, then I was frustrated. Got tired of the tweaking and turning and adjusting and tweaking and turning and adjusting, and just was looking for a simpler path. And I had always had a affection for traditional archery, the simplicity, the tradition, the heritage, the romance, if you will. And at the same time, my daughters, I have twin daughters. They're 22 now, but they were shooting with me, and it got to be where I'm, shooting way back at the far stakes, and they're of course shooting way close at the kid stakes. And I thought, I'm going to do this traditional thing, and I can shoot right up with them at the close stakes or the kids stakes.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of a just natural progression from there. Sold all the compounds and committed to the traditional lifestyle, if you will.
Yeah, there's a lot of people will do that. I've talked to several archers that are the same deal as you. They went to the compounds and now are going back to traditional archery, and it's been around a whole lot longer than compounds.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
And not, of course, not taking away anything from compounds. I of course shoot, many of my friends shoot compounds. Actually, my 17-year-old son shoots a compound. But he told me the last time we were on the 3D course, he said, I think I want to try the traditional thing.
Traditional thing, yeah.
I think I can do both. And I said, well, sure. So I actually picked him up a Java Man elk heart at the Compton show that was just this last weekend in Michigan.
So what was it that got you started in archery to start with?
It was mainly just we lived at the time when I was growing up in a neighborhood development, but behind our houses was an old abandoned apple orchard and fields, and So we could just, as kids roam wherever we wanted. We had plenty of room. There was no one behind us. I think there was like 120 acres of just, fields and everything else to explore. And at the time, my older brother and his friends had some straw bales set up, and they would come over. His friends would come over and they would shoot their compounds. And so as a little kid, you want to be included in everything. So
Right.
had this little fiberglass bow, and we just had a paper plate that we would stick to the bales and, start flinging arrows. And that's really how I got started. My brother was a mentor, as he's 12 years older, was able to, help me along the path. And then when the time came for him to upgrade bows, then I got a hold of his bear whitetail. So
Oh,
that was compound. And, I shot and shot and shot. And as a kid, I had a friend who also shot, and we would go. At the time, there was a shop in Grand Rapids, downtown Grand Rapids, called a Bear Archery. And it was this old school archery shop, had a whole wall of straw bales. And I still remember the smell, walking in the shop. There was no air conditioning. So in the summer, he had his door open, windows open, and we would have our parents drop us off almost every day during the summer when we were young and didn't have school, too young to really work.
yeah.
And we would spend 3 hours there, 2 to 3 hours of just shooting and talking to to us, the old timers, and getting their advice and listening to their stories. And that was really how we gained all our knowledge, is just soaking it all up, soaking up as much as we could soak up. And back in those days, shooting the bear whitetail, and I don't even remember what my friend had. I don't know if it was a Ben Pearson or what, but anyways, we shot with sights and we shot with peeps, but we shot with finger taps.
Yeah.
So of course that was before releases were even on the scene. So I guess we didn't have much of a choice.
Yeah.
So that really got me started. And of course we'd, look at the magazines in the shop and make dreams and plans. We're going to hunt elk and moose and bear and, everything else that were, not really local to us. Michigan has a great growing bear population, but back in those days, it was pretty far north and then in the UP. So we didn't really consider bear hunting as something that was available to us, but we small game hunted. We're always running around, shooting at things. We deer hunted together with my friend's father. He took us out, and then I would go with my brother and his friends also up north, about 100 miles north, and they had a camp and a piece of public land that they had been hunting for years and years. So I really cut my teeth up there. That was a lot of cedar swamps and, timber. But there was really no ag, nothing to really pattern the deer. They kind of did their own thing, and there was no rhyme or reason. And then the whole baiting practice came on the scene, and we found out that we could, lug bags of carrots back into the cedar swamp, and the deer really appreciated that. And
Yeah.
so, we started seeing more deer, and we started seeing them regularly, and we started, getting shots and lots of misses over the years. And And they typically on that public land in that area would, they'd come into the bait pretty late. It was usually, the last 15, 20 minutes of light. But we ended up getting a permission to hunt. I think it was 100-acre parcel that a gentleman my brother worked with had available, and it was further east in Michigan, and then you start getting into some agriculture and timber and creeks, and it was very good hunting. It was we saw many bucks and many sizable bucks. There was one morning, I don't even know, it was during the rut, and it was probably 6, 7, 8 bucks I saw, and there was one giant that came through, and I shot and missed him with my punch cutter. If you remember those punch cutter mechanical broadhead, it was like one of the first, if not the first, mechanical broadhead on the scene. But it buried itself nicely into a log, and I had to a little bit to get it out. But interestingly enough, later on that first season, my brother and I both shot our very first whitetails ever on the same night, the same evening. So that was pretty special.
Oh yeah.
And it was one of those situations we would always try to take a week off during the rut here in Michigan, which usually meant the first week of November into maybe through the 10th, 11th, 12th. It just depended on how the dates aligned. But I was a little burnout, and so I told my brothers, 2 of my brothers were with me, or I was with them. I told them I'm just gonna stay in the truck and take a nap. So they went out and got set up, and then I thought to myself after half hour or so, wow, this is silly. I came up, not going to shoot anything in the truck. And so I got all my stuff. I headed down the trail, and there was a tree maybe 150 yards from the truck, and it had a crotch in it, maybe 5, 6 feet up that I could get into. So I just got myself up there, and I got in the crotch of this tree. And next thing I know, half an hour before it got dark, a whole column of antlerless deer came up the hill. So I could hear them coming, and I was pretty much ready, came to full draw when the largest doe, or the lead doe, was cresting the hill. So I didn't make the best shot, but as a younger person, I think I was 21 at the time. So I shot, ended up taking her through the neck and then through the shoulder and into the vitals, and heard a bunch of crashing. Went over there, saw the blood. So I went to where I knew my brothers would be coming out of the swamp and just waited for them. And of course, my brother came out and he said, "Well, how'd you do?" Because they saw me standing there. Or I think the first comment was probably something sarcastic about me sleeping in the truck.
Yeah.
So my we always kind of have a place we meet, when we're out hunting together. It's like meet here after dark. So rather than going all the way back to the truck, we always meet in case someone needs help, someone doesn't show up, then you can go in after them.
Yeah.
But anyway, we shared stories, and I told them my story. I was all excited, and my brother's like, "Well, I shot one too." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, this is ridiculous." So I think we went back to the truck. That's what we usually do, and kind of get rid of some extra clothing.
Right.
get rid of anything. We usually don't carry our bows, especially after dark. We just put them away in the truck, take our flashlights, our knives, no such thing as all the gloves and everything they sell nowadays. We just, it was just get your hands dirty, wash them off in the creek or in some dirt or whatever. But so we walked up the hill. I walked over, showed them where she was standing when I shot. And, there's just blood all over the place. And you could follow, a blind man could follow it. And it went right down the hill, as they often do, right back the way they came. And it looked like you just had a 5-gallon bucket. We're dumping it everywhere. So, obviously she didn't go far, maybe 40 yards down the hill. And it ended up, because she was facing me, not straight on, but almost. And I took her through the jugular and then through the one lung. So she just, bled out quickly.
Right.
But the nice big doe, and we found out later after taking her to one of the Michigan DNR check stations that she was 8. They aged her at 8.5 years old.
Whoa, that's old for a deer in the wild.
And they mentioned, she may not have made it another year, because they showed us her teeth, of course, and they were almost non-existent. So they said that she would have had trouble, continuing to feed, and she probably would have died of starvation. So it was a good one to take.
Yeah.
So then we went and to where my brother was sitting, and he was actually sitting on the ground. He did that a lot, and went to where he shot his deer, another doe, and he had taken her through, I want to say, the liver, a little far back. So there was less blood, a little further track, but we found her, and so we were all happy and congratulated each other. Our first deer, both of our first deer with archery, and it was both the same night. So that was pretty cool.
Now, were those with compounds or recurves?
Oh, those were with compounds. Yeah,
Compound.
that was my compound days still. And at that time, like I said, I was 21. I was going to school, college, local here in Grand Rapids. And, as many guys in that stage of their life, I was, I'd go to the gym and I'd lift and work out, go to school, and I was working. My first job was at McDonald's restaurant at and I was still working there while I was going to school. So long story longer, I guess. I was shooting Hoyt Pro Force Extreme with a 6-inch overdraw, because that was the cool thing back then.
Yep. Back then, overdraws to get the speed out of them.
And I think that was right about the time carbons came out, and they were trying to even think if the Beemans were the first one on the scene, but they had a pretty sizable insert outsert on the end of them.
Yeah.
And I was shooting 92 pounds back in those days, a young guy who spent some time at the gym, and the bow sounded almost like a 22 when it went off.
Right. Yeah.
It was so fast, it didn't matter. Then I would have liked to have known, what it chronographed at as compared to today's bows, but it was fast.
Yeah, back then, we put the overdraws on, to shorten the breeze height and get a little shorter arrows, a little bit lighter arrow. And, they weren't real smooth in your hand because, the angle of the limbs put a lot of force forward, and, they were loud, but you can shoot fingers with them.
Right.
These new ones that are 32, 34 inches. Yeah, unless you got like a 26-inch draw length, I'm 20, I draw 29, and I can't shoot fingers even back when they were, 34, 36, because my draw length, my ring finger would go numb. So I had
Oh,
to do a release because it just went numb on me. With the other ones, when the older ones, like the Bear Whitetail 2 is the first compound I shot. There's my brother's bow. And, you could shoot fingers with them. I shot fingers for a long time, but it wasn't until I started having trouble with my finger going numb that I went to release and, go through a lot of terrible releases until you finally decide, I'm going to get a Scott or Carter or one of the high-end ones. And,
oh, sure. I still remember when I switched from fingers to a release, and again in my backyard shooting at the straw bales. And I'm the type of person that, when I get frustrated or things aren't going my way, sometimes I get a little what do I say? I get angry. So I don't know how many times I threw that release, just because it was so new to me and so foreign. It was like giving me the most horrible target panic, and I jerked and yanked, and arrows went left and right and high and low, and I thought, this is insane. But I stuck with it because it was the latest and greatest and coolest thing, and finally got acclimated. A big part of me now wishes I would have just stuck with the fingers, because I could have made the transition into traditional easier.
Right. Yeah, and some of those old releases were just were not very good at all. I actually had a release break on me. The head just come loose. I was about halfway drawn back, and all of a sudden the head just come off, and of course, it sent the arrow up into the ductwork down at the range. And yeah, we were shooting back about 30 yards back, and I found the head of the release almost up to the backstop. So it was like 20-30 yards down range. It went flying. I was shooting 70 pounds, and I wasn't at 70 yet because I wasn't at full draw. But yeah, it just went loose. And yeah, the weird part is the brand name of the release was Failsafe. And I had a machinist in front of me. He made a new part for it, which was much better than the original one. And I had two of them. I still got them sitting in my box that I have archery equipment in. It's an old tackle box, but I've got lots of parts and stuff that through the years you go through all the different stuff. And I know I first started, the first sights that we had was the old bar with the little grooves in it, and you have the little pin that you move in and out, and then you tighten down, and you try and move them up a little bit and loose them down, and then the pin moves left and right. Try to move it left and right, and yeah, you probably remember those as well, because that was kind of our first sights. And I remember trying to find my very first sight that I wanted, a decent one, and I was like, there just wasn't much out there, and I finally did find one, and found it online or on a magazine or something. And I went down to the one archery store I used to go to all the time, and I says, "Hey, can you get this?" "Yeah, I can get that." Got it in. It's one of those things. Sometimes you find something, go to the, I've done the same thing at the gun store. Go in and say, "This is cool. Do you have it?" "Yeah, we got one right here."
Oh yeah.
And it's always nice. And now the sights are just so much better now than it was before. They're just so much better, and rests are a lot better. I remember trying to adjust the one on the one PSE I had. Actually, my first PSE, I've got several more than that. My kids all shoot PSE, and I've got two of them. And but it was an overdraw rest, and in order to adjust the two pins, because it was the cock further down style, just two pins. And in order to adjust the inside pin, you had to take the screw out, take the outside pin out, and adjust the inside one. And then you had to put the other one back in, adjust it. And if it wasn't right, you had to keep pulling out. And it's like, yeah. And those are a pain. The new ones now are just so much easier to adjust. Each one's individual, and you can move them around. And now it's little Teflon covers for them. You can drop back and they don't squeak. And
yeah, all the new stuff now is just engineered so much better.
all right, yeah.
We were coming up through the through the ranks in the late 70s, early 80s. It was many of those, like you said, many of
Yeah.
the signs look like something that someone put together in their garage. um, or maybe just one step up from their garage, but they were pretty rudimentary. But it makes sense when you think, well, just a few short years earlier, they weren't using sights, or maybe using sights in like the field archery, that was prevalent back then.
Yeah, and when I started in the '60s, got my first bow, it was a 25-pound fiberglass Ben Pearson recurve, and then you had a choice of a recurve or longbow made with wood or fiberglass. That was your only options,
Mm-hmm.
and you had your choice of wood, which type of wood arrows you're going to use, and feathers. And there was no releases. You usually a glove or a tab, and I
Right.
stayed that way for years. In the '60s, it wasn't until late '70s that or mid '70s when compounds even come out. And
Yeah.
and then later, after I shot my brothers, and when I finally got my first one, it was one of those where I went into the archery shop that was in town, and I said, I want to get a compound bow. So she brought out this American Challenger was the brand.
Hmm.
They got bought out by High Point, but so she hands it to me and says, "Well, draw it back." It's like, how's that feel? Okay, I didn't know any better. It was set for 32-inch draw length.
Oh my gosh.
So when I finally did, this has been many years later, and I got that bow ended up breaking. That was interesting story. Right before hunting season, I'm down making sure everything's going, and I'm shooting and I'm adjusting my sights, shooting, adjustment, and then nothing is working. So I finally decide I'm gonna go up close and figure out what's going on. I draw back and shot, and I'm holding the bottom half of the bow in my hand. The top half at the handle, it broke at the riser, come back and smack me in the chest.
Oh my gosh.
That was one of those poor risers,
Mm-hmm.
not the new machine, risers now, the
Magnesium.
chances of them. Yeah,
Yep.
yeah. And, the machined ones now, the chances of them breaking are, you got a better chance of winning lottery. But back
Right.
then, because there was poured that, you didn't know what you were getting. And what it was doing, it was slowly weakening, and it was weakening, and it was slowly going. And all of a sudden, with that shot, that recoil from shooting just snapped it the rest of the way.
Sure.
Then I had to run up and get a bow real quick, and that's what I ended up with my first PSE. And of course, then I was like, I needed 32-inch draw length, because that's what that one was. That's what I thought it was. And shooting too long a draw length, I've hit my arm at deer, with big heavy coats, and made bad shots on them. Still get the deer. I the one thing she did do is she said, I said, which broadhead? She said Muzzy. And that's been what, in the late '70s, '80s sometime. And it's the only broadhead I've ever shot. I still shoot Muzzies.
Oh, okay.
I switched from a 4-blade down to a 3-blade. So I shoot 100-grain 3-blade Muzzy. And I have stuck a Muzzy broadhead shooting. When I had my store, I had a broadhead target up, and I was shooting at it, and I was tired. I probably shouldn't have been shooting because it was after working all day. I missed and hit the concrete block
Oh.
with that broadhead. So I go up there, the broadhead's sticking in the concrete block, shaft is on the ground, the insert broke in half, and it cracked the shaft back about an inch is all it did. Those are PSE arrows. And so I reached up, pulled out the Muzzy broadhead. I didn't even deform the tip.
Really?
Yeah. It stuck in a concrete block, 70-pound at 20 yards, and it did not hurt it a bit. I don't know which one it is, because I didn't keep track of it, but I still have that broadhead, and it's mixed in somewhere in my broadheads that I shoot. Yeah, that's saying a lot when it hits the concrete block.
Oh, I had shot Muzzies for a few years as well. And then I ran into, I don't know if it was just a bad year or two for Muzzy, but I ran into an issue where the ferrules they wouldn't spin true. And I don't, like
Oh,
I said, know what caused it or what may have occurred, but it's when I switched from muzzies. But I've shot so many different broadheads over the years, I kind of lose track.
yeah, I did one year. I didn't have much time to get my bow set up, so I got some Montax. I forget which one it was, mechanicals, because they're a little quicker to set up.
Oh,
There's supposedly shoot like field tips. No, nothing shoots like a field tip because there's always something different about them. You know, they're longer, so your arrow is a little bit longer or something, but they're probably close enough for, around here in the Midwest, our hunting distances, 20 yards is most of what we're going to get, especially, you up there in Michigan, a lot of trees. The chances of getting longer than a 20-yard shot is slim, unless you're out in, in the croplands. And
right.
so it doesn't really matter too much. But I know with the muzzies, out of my hunting bow, they do not shoot anywhere near field tips. They're off.
Right.
But I can group the broadheads. I only shoot single spots when I'm shooting those into broadhead target, but I can stick them muzzy broadheads into the X-ring. So I know they're good. If I shoot field tips on that bow, I'm not going to get closer. I'm going to be off probably two inches or better.
Yep.
But at that point, I don't care where it hits because I know the broadheads are on.
Right.
And I have another bow if I'm going to shoot field tips, for score like 3Ds and stuff. I have another, PSE like 2003, and my hunting bow's a 2001 PSE. So yeah,
Well,
I haven't gone to the new bows.
that's what was common practice though for, back then shooting fixed heads is you would shoot all summer in preparation for, hunting season, but then just before hunting season, you'd screw in your broadheads and then you would
Right.
adjust to the broadheads. And then many times, many people, archers, after hunting season, your bows wouldn't get touched until next August or September.
Right. Yeah.
Any of us, I never shot all year, 12 months out of the year until I, many years later, I kind of, someone wanted me to shoot a league. I had never shot a league, and I just started doing that where I'd go and shoot every week and kind of got hooked on the whole competitive, component of it. I mean, shooting with the same people every week, that was nice. Shooting for score and having the scores posted, that was, kind of sucked me in. And then that just, that was a whole rabbit hole in and of itself. Like with any activity or hobby or sport or whatever you want to label it as, you can get in as shallow or as deep as you want to.
Right.
Just like, I mean, the guys that are golfers, they'll spend, I don't even know because I don't golf, but $500, $600, $800,000 on a single driver, but
Yeah.
you can offer a driver or a whole set for, $100 somewhere, it's just, how deep you want to get into any activity, sport, hobby.
Well, and I got one guy that I watch, a woodworker, and he says, the better tools don't make you a better woodworker. They just make your job a little easier. If you're
Oh,
if you're a terrible archer, it doesn't matter what you're shooting. I always tell people it's like you're better off to go to the pawn shop and spend $300-400 on a complete set with arrows and bows and release the whole thing if it fits you. If you go to a shop and they sell you $1,000 bow and it don't fit you right, it's worthless to you because you're
right.
never going to shoot it right. It needs to fit you. And that's one of the biggest struggles we go through sometimes is, somebody wants to come and they want this high-end bow. And it's like, no, you can't handle it. Because some of the high-end bows, they're not as forgiving, they're faster. And, that's one thing on mechanicals, as the bows got faster and faster, then the mechanicals had a big advantage because it's harder to control a fixed blade when you start getting above a certain speed. Your tuning has to be dead on perfect, especially you got wings in front and wings in the back. And they have to complement each other and go straight. For the slower bows, you can do that, put a little more, put 4-inch fletching on instead of vanes, and that way, the arrows will fly good. But as it get faster and faster, not only your arrows are harder to control, but your form has to be more perfect.
Right.
Because a fast bow is going to magnify any errors you have in your form. It's going to tell you.
Well, I remember, I don't know, was it 15-ish years ago, Bowtech came out with the 82nd Airborne and the 101st Airborne bows. And of course, they were screamers, very short brace heights, and fast as all can be. But I don't know how many shops, because I frequent, all different shops, how many shops I was in when guys would come in. It's last week or two of September, and they're like, hey, I screwed on my broadheads and this thing is just shooting everywhere. And it's, to your point, the speed demon bows are more finicky. Yeah,
Right.
getting incredible speed, but anything that is a deviation perfect, you're going to have issues with.
Yeah, and I've seen that. And then when you go to a lot of tournaments, you're limited to, I think, like 300 feet per second anyway. So, because that gives everybody the same limitation. That,
Right.
everybody thinks, the new bows are so fast. My 2001 Carrera was rated at 320 feet per second.
Oh, wow.
I don't get anywhere near that. I'm probably about 40 feet per second slower because, well, I put string dampeners on, those string leeches. I put them on the string and the cables as well, quiets it down. I have a peep in there, which slows it down. I have a loop on there instead of just a single knock point that slows it down. I do shoot 70 pounds, but I'm not shooting 30-inch draw length, which slows it down. So, yeah, that's the everybody says, well, I want to shoot 340 feet per second. Yeah, the only way you could possibly do that is if you have a crossbow, because if the bow's rated for that, you're not getting it because you got to shoot 70 pounds, one knock point, 350 grain arrow, and which slows them down if you shoot more than 350 grain arrow. That's your 70 pounds.
Right.
And that all slows it down. And hunting arrows are normally heavier than that, in the 400 to 500 grain range. And, then, all that slows it down and you're not going to get it. It's got to be a good shooter. That's the whole thing I, try to get, across the people. It's got to fit you right. If you're comfortable, you like it. And, when I was getting new archers in, I'd say, first we'd find out if they're right or left eye dominant, so we get with a right or left-handed bow. And I say, just go through and pick them out. How's it feel in your hand? If it feels good, okay, let's consider shooting that one. And then you eventually get down to, okay, I like this bow and I like this bow. Well, let's go shoot them. And sometimes I've even had this, like, okay, shoot with your eyes closed. Yeah, because then they can feel what's wrong. And I ask them, like, well, which one you like better and why? I didn't care what their answer was. I just needed them to say something, and then that way they express it. And then so, it's like, oh, I like this bow. And it's nothing to do with brand.
Right.
I've had guys come into the shop and say, well, I'm going to get the best bow next time. I'm going to go get, say a Matthews or something. They're going to say, because Matthews advertises a whole lot. And so they think Matthews is the best. It might be. I had one for a while. Good shooting bow. But what I've seen, Matthews, you dry fire a Matthews and it blows up. They do not take dry fires.
Right.
I've seen some PSEs get dry fired, and I've heard them in San Nicolas, and it's like, yeah, Let me check it over quick. Nope, nothing happened to it.
Yeah, and it, so many times guys come into the shop and they come with their buddy or their brother or their uncle or whoever, and well, they all shoot Matthews. I need a Matthews, and I always used to ask them, well, have you shot any other bows? Don't you want to see what you might like and not just follow the crowd? But you
Right.
know, a lot of guys, that's what they want. Their buddies shoot deer. Their buddies are successful. Their buddies are the club pro, so to speak. And they're shooting bow, brand X. So naturally they want, well, give me brand X.
Well, and one thing that Matthews does really well that helps push their bows is if you're going out to make money and you win a tournament, they're going to give you X amount of dollars for winning a tournament. But Matthews pays you additional if you're shooting a Matthews bow.
Mm-hmm.
So
Oh,
now I'm
money.
an archer. I'm going to win this tournament. I'm going to get this my money, but I'm going to double my money if I shoot a Matthews bow. Which one am I going to shoot?
Right.
I can shoot any one of them.
Right. Well, and you look at, all the top archery companies now are offering the contingency money, right? And for a while there, it was a little bit of a what do I want to say, like a battle. Who could offer the best contingency,
Right. Yeah.
highest amount to attract the top archers. And for, I would say probably in the last 5 years, you saw a lot of archers, jumping ship from the company they were with for, a considerable amount of time.
Right.
And the thing that always, and this is just me, but the thing that always frustrated me was I always shoot what I consider the best, and that's for me, the best
Right.
for. But even if that means there's no contingency, I always try to stay true and not, not be lured or swayed by popular opinion. I've kind of just decided what I like the best, and I follow that path, or what shoots the best for me, what works the best for me.
Yeah.
But they say money makes the world go round, right?
Yeah. Well, I know when I had my store, that's almost 20 years ago when I closed it, but or sold it. Yeah, if somebody had an open mind and was shooting Matthews, come in and shot my high-end PSEs, I'd get them in a PSE every day.
Mm-hmm.
I just thought they shot better. Anybody with an open mind, I could get them into it, out of a Matthews. Now the other bow manufacturers, except for Hoyt, it was for the Hoyt shooters, it was real tough to get them into liking the PSEs better. Just for some reason, Hoyts it was just hard for them to get out of those. But any other
Right.
book manufacturer was easy, because it was a step up. But
Right.
there's so many new ones out now that I just don't have time to go shoot them all. And I have no desire to shoot some of these new ones because I don't want to buy a new bow. and
Well,
I used to use that too, to say if you're not going to buy a new bow, don't shoot it because you're going to want it.
I remember back in the day, the PSEs were quite heavy. They were I think, I want to say like an overbuilt bow. And I'm talking like hunting bows, not competition bows
Right.
that you want heavy. But that was probably, like the early to mid 90s that I'm talking about. And that's what always kind of swayed me away from PSE, was just they were so heavy. But I shot Hoyt for a number of years, when they had all their techs, Ultra Tech and Razor Tech, and
Yeah.
And those were good bows. I mean, they shot well for me, and I actually jumped on the Matthews bandwagon the very first year they were introduced. Trying to think, the first one, a 3D vape is the one I bought, and that was their very first year. And a local shop here in Grand Rapids picked them up, and was, really pushing them. And they seem to be, along with the marketing, of course, in the magazines and everything.
Right.
But yeah, I had a few different Matthews, that 3D Vapor, and I had an MQ1.
I remember that one.
Yeah. But yeah, that original, that 3D Vapor, those, even though the solo cam, the cam was actually pretty small. And it seemed like every year on the Matthews, the cams just got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I thought, a little comical, they just had touted and applauded the solo cam so much. And then it's like, okay, now we're introducing a 2-cam bow. And so you kind of scratch your head, because it's like, well, I'm confused. Solo cams were the way to go for many years, and now they're, now the double cam bow is the way to go. And that's just part of me being, maybe a little too, I don't know if I want to say cynical, but, observing kind of trends, and thinking to myself, was that really the way to go? Because that's not where everyone is today. And it's, I guess, goes back to that old adage, you don't know what you don't know.
Right.
So, but it's interesting to see the evolution over the years, and along with, many of the hunting, let's say hunting celebrities, right? TV and DVD world.
Yeah.
This brand X is the best bow ever, and we kill all these deer, and then 5 to 8 years later, oh, now brand Y is better, and we're gonna,
Right. Yeah.
oh, okay.
It's whoever makes the best deal, that's pretty much about it. And
Yep.
I always get a kick out of the TV show, the hunting shows, and the archer is sitting back there, and he's like, sure, I'm gonna get that bow back, and then making all these movements and drawing it back, and it's like, and then you see him got the finger above the trigger, and they just slam on the trigger. Like, okay, dude, the only thing you did right is you shot a bow.
Right.
Start with, it's way too heavy for you. You can't shoot it. Because I always tell, all my students, if you can't draw back slowly, like there's a deer waiting for you, if you have to do all this movement, you're going to get busted hunting.
Right.
And then, when I found somebody's an archer, I actually did this with instructors when I college class I was taking, found out he was an archer, and I says, I'm going to give you your first lesson first. And I asked him if you use a release, and wrist strap release, and he says, yeah. And I says, I'll give you first lesson free. Quit pulling the trigger. He says, huh? How do you know? Yeah, I know. I've taught too many people. You can't pull the trigger, because, like you were saying, you didn't know what was going on. So the target panic is caused by pulling the trigger.
Right. Slapping it. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah. I've seen people do that. Finger up there, ready to shoot. Just take it. Just slap that trigger.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And sometimes it's like you can't tell them. It's like, okay. I'm done.
And I've seen some really good shooters here locally put up, top scores and just consistent. And if you look at them and their form, it's not by the book, so to speak.
Right.
Distant. And they can do the same thing time after time after time, and they've proven, shooting leagues and tournaments that the way they shoot works for them. And a lot of times that's what it's all about, is what works for the individual. But I know that one of the things that's pretty popular on some of the social media pages for the traditional community is they'll do like a shot of the day. So they'll say, well, you have to stand on 1 foot, foot and shoot, 15 yards, whatever. So different things. But the one I really liked the other day, and I don't remember who did it, but it was a take 10 seconds from the start of your draw to your shot. So you'd have to draw the bow, 1/1000ths, 2/1000ths, up to 10 seconds before you release the arrow. So I thought that was interesting because, to your point again, pull it straight back, go slow, as little movement as possible. Because people who maybe just getting into the hunting world and haven't learned through decades of trial and error, what you can get away with and what you can't. I think this is going to be my 42nd year hunting. I feel like I have a good understanding or a good handle on what I can get away with whitetails. But every once in a while, they still get, they have that sixth sense, or they have that, they see that little bit of movement that is just not right. And it's game over at that point.
Yeah. Yeah. They're pretty, I kind of look at them like a paranoid schizophrenic.
Oh yeah.
Everything's out to get them, and they're just paranoid looking at it, and they're just all over the place. And then sometimes they're relaxed, and they can care less that you're there.
Oh, right.
When I told you a story on one other podcast, but we're a place I was hunting, there was old tracks where they took them out. There's no tracks anymore, so just a walking path. And the one lady, she'd walk down there all the time, and I'm walking out, and I look over to the right, and hear probably 10, 15 feet from the trail is this doe laid down. She's bedded down. She looks up at me. I look over at her, and it's like, I got my bow in my hand. I just keep walking because I know as soon as I stop, it'll be gone. The only way I can do is walk down far enough and then slowly sneak back. And that's just not, because I was used to somebody walking the path all the time.
Right.
Didn't spook them.
Yeah. And they also, I'm sure to an extent, felt like they were well hidden, and as long as they didn't move, they would need nothing to tip their hand that they were there.
Yeah. And it wasn't covered or nothing. It was just right out there in the grasses. And I looked over at it and kept walking. It's not like I stopped, because if I'd have stopped, it'd have been gone. So I realized I'm not going to get this one. And I probably could have went back and tried sneaking up on it and getting it there, which I did one time. I seen this deer bed down right off the road. It wasn't really road, but it was the road between one field and next field on the farm. And I took off my boots because I'd heard you take your boots off, you could walk like quieter, which makes sense because they're the hard boots. You step on something and a little harder on your feet. But so I was able to go up, and I snuck up the ground cover. The grasses were about 1.5 feet high, and I got right there next to it. It would have been like 5-10 yard shot. But I got a compound. I don't have a crossbow. I can't shoot from the ground. I got to get up. And I was like, now what do I do? I'm so close to it. I can't sit up. I can't draw my compound while I'm basically laying down. So, but it was kind of fun, sneaking up on it like that and getting that close. And
oh yeah,
that was a lot of fun.
Mm-hmm.
So I imagine you got a bunch of interesting hunting stories. What's been your most exciting hunt that you've been on? Other than that first one where you and your brother got the deer the first time.
Boy, that's it's a tough one. I've had so many memorable hunts. I'll share one about a buddy and I were hunting, and his parents had a cabin in a little bit of land. I don't know, 10, 15 acres. And but it was all surrounded by public land. So it was, you know, a nice area. And the stands were all within, you know, 100 yards or less from the cabin. So it was nice just to be able to get, you know, get dressed in the cabin, walk out the door and be hunting. Well, this again was during our baiting era. And we had, you know, all the stands had bait at them, and we found this stuff that another buddy had turned us on to, and found out that it worked really well. What it was just liquid molasses from the local feed store.
Oh, yeah.
But we had never heard of it. We weren't farmers, of course. So anyways, we got this, we put the carrots out, we'd pour this. We always called it, you know, jokingly, we called it the magic gruel. You know, get the magic gruel, pour it over the carrots. So anyways, there was a one stand he was hunting, and he could shoot a target lights out, but you put a deer in front of him and he went to pieces, you know. So there was many times that he would empty his quiver. I don't know if it was 5 or 6 arrows, and then get down and go get his arrows and then climb back up in the stand. He had had enough of that. So he's like, you need to go sit in that stand. And of course I wasn't going to argue with him. So I went and sat in that stand the first night or first afternoon, and sure enough, you know, this was, I don't know, fairly early, an hour before dark, you know, plenty light, you know, and I see some movement. Well, the stand was right on the edge of maybe some 12-foot tall pine trees, and they were fairly thick. So we put the bait like in a little, a natural hole in pine trees. So the deer would come in through the pine trees, and you couldn't see them until they were virtually right there, or you picked up movement coming through little gaps in the pine trees. So I see this deer coming in, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's a buck. And let me try to think. It may have been, I think it was my first buck with a bow. And I was shooting that same Hoyt, the 92-pound Hoyt with the overdraw. And he came in and I picked a little hole in the pine tree before he even got to the bait where his shoulder was. And I shot, and of course, you know, bang, crack, and then he ran off, and that was just the bow going off and the arrow hitting him and him bolting. But so I went back to, I think my buddy stayed at the cabin that night, was watching TV, you know, probably taking a nap. And I went back and said, well, I had a buck come in and I shot it. And he's like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, you know. And there again, I think we were 21, 22, you know, we were young.
Yeah.
People I look at now as kids, we were kids, I guess. So we went, started tracking, you know, found it. He never left the pines, probably only made it 30 yards. And that 92-pound Hoyt, I remember, you know, when we gutted him and dressed him and everything, it had gone through like both shoulders, like nothing. And of course, you know, lungs, top of the heart. So he was, and you know, I don't know, that may have been a muzzy. I don't recall. Like I said, I've shot so many heads. I shot wasp for a while and satellite, and I think, of course, the muzzies, and I think maybe the razorbacks. But you know, so many of the fixed heads before the mechanicals came out. But yeah, that was a fun story, because I know for a fact he emptied at least one quiver at that same stand. But later in that year, it was in December. There's snow on the ground. It was, I think, around 12 or 15 degrees. And I had gone out in the morning and sat in a different stand, no bait at that stand, just some runways. And I had a spike come in that I was going to shoot. And so after sitting there for a couple hours in those temperatures, I got maybe to 3/4 draw with that 92. And it was like I hit a wall. My back just stopped. And I'm like, uh-oh. So of course, being young and dumb, I just, gritted my teeth and yanked it back and felt something pop in my back. Ended up missing the spike, but yeah, it's those, a lot of those hunts we did as young guys with no responsibilities. It was a lot of good times just hanging out, and we had no plans or aspirations. Of course, we would have liked to have seen nice bucks, mature bucks, but pretty much anything that came in was getting shot at. You know, if it's brown, it's down, we used to say. I'm
Yeah.
sure you've heard that before, but it was just, hey, whatever we get an opportunity at. I mean, we eat all the venison, process it, butcher it ourselves, and it's just about meat for us. So to I guess further on that story, I hunted for years and years in Michigan and shot, you know, shot deer, shot bucks, shot, 6 points, 8 points, decent bucks. But I got to a point, and this was would have been 2007. And that was the same year I started shooting in a league and getting the competition bug. But anyways, I had an opportunity to go down to Illinois. And I thought, I kind of need to figure out if it's kind of a, what do I want to say? Ego check. Am I a good hunter, and do I have what it takes? So I booked with an outfitter in Illinois, and he I had never heard of these before, but I guess they're popular in the South, and he was from the South. Is like a hunt club. So there's a piece of property, and there's so many guys in this club, but you're not all hunting at the same time. So there was a period, I think it was in October, you could hunt as much as you wanted, anytime you wanted. But then November, you had to pick a week. I think November, maybe early December, you had to choose a week that you wanted to be there, because they limit it to what their bunkhouse could, occupy with guys sleeping there. So anyways, went down there. Actually, I don't know if you know the name, Clifford Names. He used to do some video work for, oh gosh, the Gregory's, Jay and Tammy Gregory, and he did some. Anyways, he had done some work, and he was, he knew his stuff. He was from Mississippi. Well, all the guys in camp were from the South, except for me. And so that was funny, because one night, or a group came in, and I didn't say anything. I'm just standing there listening to everyone, and finally there was something I felt I needed to share, and I opened my mouth, and it was the funniest thing ever. They all spun on a dime and looked at me, and one of them says, "Where the hell are you from? Canada?" I said, "Well, not quite, but close." But it was funny. But anyway, so I had ended up making friends with a Cajun guy, and he was from Louisiana, obviously, and I could only make out maybe every 4 to 5, a fourth to fifth word. And I would stare at him, when we talked, to try to, understand what he was saying. And boy, it was tough. So the old joke of, some people need subtitles. Well, he needed subtitles.
Right.
But it was down there in November, the week prior to me. And he told me, we had talked on the phone, and he said, this one stand has 130-inch 8-point, comes in all the time. He says, I've passed them multiple times. He says, I've shot 130s in the past, 125s, 130s, and I'm looking for something bigger. Well, I probably hadn't even shot an 80-inch deer here in Michigan. Never measured them, but just looking at them. So I'm like, oh, I'm all about that. I'm tickled pink with a 130-inch deer.
Right.
So went in, my first or second morning during my reserved week, and ended up, didn't see a deer for a couple hours. And I was sitting over what they call down there like a creek crossing, where consistent,
Right.
yeah, shallow enough that the deer always cross there, or cross there a lot. So anyways, there was this big section of private next to this lease we had, or hunt club, and it was really thick. And I thought, well, you know what, I'm going to start doing some calling. So I tried to paint a scenario that, a buck was tending a doe. So I'm doing some drawn out doe bleats and a couple grunts, and more doe bleats, a couple grunts. And I would do that maybe every half hour. Well, next thing I know, after I think it was like 2 sessions of that, I look through, there was a bunch of popple trees, and here comes this buck. And the first thing I noticed about him was he's having to turn his head to get it through the popples, to get his hand through the popples. And I'm like, oh my gosh, oh my gosh, oh my gosh. Well, I had shot a lot that year, and I was pretty confident in my shooting. I was shooting a Bowtech Commander, which is that goofy limb design they had that split like a Y, and then the limb was on top of it. It's kind of like some of the Hoyt bows are now, but not as, I guess, more pronounced than what Hoyt's design is. But anyways, he went down in the creek, and the bank was high, so I couldn't see him at all. And I thought, okay, he's going to come up out of that creek bed, and he's probably going to stop and look around. So I came to full draw, and I couldn't see him. But I mean, a second or two, and he crests that creek bank. And it was probably 25, 26 yards, and he stopped. And it was like, I don't even remember shooting. It was more like muscle memory. It just happened. And I remember I was shooting the rage heads. And I remember seeing, it was like on some of the videos you see where, I hit them, and I had never shot, I'd never a deer that size. And just the way he reacted was so much like everything I had seen on all the videos. He kind of soaked up the arrow more than it was like he didn't really jump. Like a lot of smaller deer I've shot, when you hit them, they'll jump a lot of times. And
Right.
he just soaked it up. But I remember seeing immediately there was blood pouring everywhere. And I was just, holy moly, this is when I need a video, I need a video, whatever. But anyways, I watched him run, and he ran maybe 40 yards. And I didn't see him go down, but I just didn't see him anymore. I didn't see him. I didn't hear him. I just like lost him. So I was like, oh my gosh. So I always, my brother always taught me that, you shoot a deer with a bow, you wait a minimum of an hour. Minimum.
Yeah, for a good shot. Yeah.
Yeah, for a good shot. Right. So, I knocked another arrow because I had a doe tag. And I just sat there, calmed down, an hour went by or so. And I'm like, okay, I'm pretty methodical when I get in and out of a stand. So I kind of have a process for, taking the arrow off my rest, putting it in the quiver, packing this up, packing that up, taking off heavy clothing and stuffing them in my backpack, lower the bow, put my backpack on, and then I unclip from my harness, and climb down. So anyways, that takes, that process takes a little time. But anyways, since I saw where I hit him, and I saw the blood there, I just made a straight line to where I thought I had last seen him. Well, I walk over there, and of course, I'm more in a hurry than I should be. And I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Where is he? Well, it was all tall grass.
Yeah.
And he was in, so I didn't find him immediately. As of course, panic sets in, and there was like a little deformation in that grass, and that's where he was, in this deformation. So until I walked practically right up on him, I couldn't see him. And it was one of those things, when I found him, it was just, I was in awe, because I had never shot anything mature. And I say mature, I think he was a 3-year-old. So it's not like he was 6 or 7, but
Right.
to shoot a 3-year-old buck, I was beyond ecstatic. And that that July, my dad had actually passed away, and so it was, special for me. And my dad, while after, how can I say this, during my lifetime, he never hunted. He had hunted when he was young, but then had been drafted into the Army during the Korean War. And he said, I was lucky enough to come home. He says, I'm not going to go out in the woods and get shot at. So he never hunted while I was alive. But it was just kind of a special thing, because he was alive when I got my tag, my Illinois tag, and I, talked to him about it, and he was excited for me to go. And then that same year in December, I went to Iowa for their gun season, which I took my muzzle loader, and I shot about 140-inch 10-point in Iowa. So I shot them both that same year, and it was just, for me, I felt like my dad was helping me out when on both of those hunts. It was special in that way, but it was also special in me really, at least in my own mind, but affirming that I was a good hunter. I could take 2, decent mature bucks in 2 incredibly different scenarios. And it gave me all those years of hunting Michigan and going through because my brother and I had always done the whole scent control thing, and to like the extreme, where we'd wash everything, we'd store them in Rubbermaid totes. We took a shower every morning. We drove to our spot. We got out of the truck. We stripped down pretty much to our underwear, and would put our hunting clothes on. And this was even if it was single digits, you just do it a lot faster.
Yeah.
But so it was like years and years and years of going through all of that and not really ever having, I'll say, luck or an opportunity in Michigan, and then going to Illinois and Iowa and having it seemed having that payoff, come to fruition, that, hey, this was it is good practice. And I still do it to this day, and my kids do it. And, I think I've kind of proven to them in different scenarios over the years that it does make a difference, especially in areas that are heavily hunted, a lot of
Right.
pressure, well, public land, close to a bigger city. Grand Rapids is the second biggest city in Michigan outside of Detroit. So you get a lot of guys who want to just drive 20, 30 miles from home or less and hunt the public land that's close by. So it gets more traffic. And then some of it has higher numbers of predators, coyotes, and up north you get into bears, but and some cats, but I don't think they have nearly the impact that the coyotes do. And the bears secondarily, but I think the coyotes are the worst.
Yeah, coyotes and bobcats take a lot of small deer.
Yeah. Yeah. And so speaking of that, another story for you. In 2019, I drew a bear permit for the Lower Peninsula, which took me 15 years of accumulating points on Michigan's point system. So I finally drew in the unit I wanted to draw. That's only 100 miles from my home, and found an area to hunt, baited it. Had a friend of mine who lived in that area who kept it baited while I was back home, waiting for the season to open, and had some huge bears on camera. I mean, 450 plus pounds.
Big bear.
Big bears, yeah, but they wouldn't come in much or at all. I think we got a couple pictures in the daylight. So then the week comes. It was just a 1 week hunt in that unit, and you have you have the hound guys running around, and they're always trying to strike a fresh trail, of course, get on a bear. And but anyways, that particular week it was sunny every day, and it was 85 to 90 degrees.
Oh,
and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. This is like the worst weather ever. So I went back in the swamp, cedar swamp, probably a mile, crossed a couple little creeks, tried to get down where it was cooler. The weather was cooler, because of the creeks and all the cedars, and thought, well, maybe that was the ticket. Well, anyways, back to my point, I'm sitting there one night, and I had a little creek behind me, actually, and I'm just kind of looking around, and I catch movement out of the corner of my eye, and I look over there, and I'm like, oh, that's a cat. Like, what the heck? Because there was no houses, anywhere for probably at least a mile radius, probably a mile and a half. Not that a cat couldn't, go that far by any means, but
just a regular house cat.
What's that?
Just a regular house cat.
Yeah. Well, then it dawned on me. I was like, that's not a cat. That's a freaking bobcat.
Oh.
So in all the years I spent hunting cedar swamps, everything, I had never seen a bobcat. I'd seen tracks in the snow in the spring when there was steelhead fishing and different things. I saw, quite a few of the tracks in those times. But anyways, I was able to get my phone out and get a little short video clip of him just walking along that creek. And I could have shot him, obviously, but number one, it wasn't season, and number two, I didn't have, so but it was just cool to watch him, just witness him and in his natural habitat, and he had no idea I was there, so that made it even better.
Yeah, it makes for a good thing going on when you can see you're up there and they don't even know you're there and they just kind of walk by.
Yep, exactly. And kind of on the whole traditional archery theme, I was wearing on purpose, I was wearing old threadbare camouflage, the old World War II, or whatever they call it. Just kind of that was my last night that I was able to bear hunt. And I'm like, I'm just gonna wear my old school stuff and maybe it'll bring me some luck, some karma. Didn't work. I didn't see, didn't see. Yeah, that was 52 hours in a tree stand that week is what I figured I had in. And
A lot of hours.
hours, never saw a bear, but they say it's a journey, right? It's
Yeah. Well, you got a good story out of it though. That bobcat coming in.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it's been great talking with you. We had a lot of good stories, and I always get something out of each of these podcasts, and hope you got something out of it too. And nothing else, we got to chat and know each other, a little better.
Sure, absolutely. And I certainly appreciate the opportunity and your time as well.
It's a lot of fun. I like doing these. The podcast is monetized, but I don't get much out of it. It's just a few cents for everybody that listens to it. But hey, that's not why I'm doing it.
Oh,
It's a lot of fun. I get to talk to archers all over the world, and just I've got this associated with the Archery Talk 101 Facebook group, and in there, if you have any questions or once your form checked, upload a video, and then somebody can look at it. Whether we're shooting compounds or shooting recurves or longbows, we got people in the group that have a lot of experience, and that's just kind of what I'm building, a community of archers kind of helping each archers out, and that's always a fun thing to do.
yeah.
I,
Well, it's funny, but the whole social media, internet world is one of the best things ever. And at the same time, it's one of the worst things ever.
yeah, yeah,
You
it definitely can be.
Yeah. You can get a lot of misinformation at times.
But yeah, when somebody says, how's my form, and they say practice more, yeah,
Yeah,
that's not an answer. You got
right.
to do it correctly, and then and then when I was initially building the group, I said, well, hey, come to this group, upload your video. Someone's going to give you some suggestions on what to try, and so a lot of them do that, and I think a lot of them don't realize they can do that. But hey, I try to help them whenever we can, and that's just the way I run that group, is providing value, and that's
Absolutely.
that's what's great about that. Is it's been a lot of fun doing, and I wish I had more time to do it, but I got other things going on too as well.
Oh, right. Understandable.
Yeah, even though I'm retired, it's like, how come my dad was busier when he retired and when he was like, how can you be busier? Well, now I know how.
Oh, yep. You always find ways to fill your time, right?
Yeah, yeah. And now instead of working for somebody else, I'm doing what I want to do, and it's not like work, although I sometimes spend way more hours doing stuff than what I should. But well, it's been great talking with you, and I'm sure we'll do this again. And the podcasts come out, twice a week, so make sure you keep up on them. Uh, they're just so much fun, and if you have any ideas, make comments, because leave a comment and we'll check it out and see. And
Oh,
I'll always link to the description, how to get to the podcast, and or not the podcast because you're already on the podcast, but I mean, link in the description on how to get to the Facebook group and stuff like that. And feel free to join and ask questions.
yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much again.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I'm glad you come on. I got a lot of good stories.
Yeah.
Well, my name is Roy Canterbury, and I've been your host today on Archery Talk 101.